Hello, this is Will Faber from Art to Ride, and today we're going to start a week-long series called Developing Collection. You've all been following Amber and Legolas for some time now. He's at about the 2-year mark. Refresh your memory on his history. I discovered this horse at a clinic, actually, in Bakersfield. He was just 3 years old. He'd just been under saddle. And a couple of ladies brought him there in a Western saddle, and I got on him and just absolutely loved him. I tried to buy him at that point, but they weren't interested in selling him. Then they called me about a year and a half later, and for financial reasons, had decided to sell this horse. Unfortunately, by that point, they had tried to train him on their own for a couple of years, and had managed only to break him in the neck. That is, he was overflexed at the third vertebrae severely. He was running through the bridle. If you tried to lunge him, he would just go completely insane and bolt off with you and drag you around the arena. He was also bolting in the canter quite often, sort of thing. So we had to back up, and even with this horse, and do some remedial work. But once again, it takes about the same amount of time whether you're starting a 3 or 4-year-old, or 5-year-old, or you're starting a 20-year-old. If they've never been over their backs, it's going to take about 2 years to bring them to the level of this horse, which is that foundation work where he's well developed the top line, the withers have pulled up through the shoulders, the back has come up, and that allows the back end to come under. We must remember that collection can never be achieved without this, and this is once again why we see so many horses falsely pulled into a frame and people working so hard to try to ride them because they've never developed correctly, so they'll never develop collection correctly. All that will happen is you'll end up shortening the gaits. And we see this on many of these very expensive horses. They're such fabulous movers that even in shortened gaits, they have so much knee action that it fools people who don't really know what they're looking at. But once again, to correct all those problems, it's been about a 2-year process to bring him to where he is now. That is, the neck has been corrected. He's well over his top line. And most importantly, he's also finished growing. This was a very, very big horse. He's nearly 18 hands. And it's taken quite some time for him to develop to the point that he can even go in a dressage ring, so to speak, that it's big enough for him. He used to be, in the very beginning, his canter stride would be 3 or 4 strides down the entire long side. So that's just beginning to come into some sort of regularity, so to speak, and he's getting over his back in all 3 gaits. And so he's beginning to be ready for collection. So notice that we're starting off here in the warm-up. We warm up in the same way we do every horse, no matter what level it's going to go to, starts at the same place. We can't just get on a horse and ask it to do collection like we're asking it to do some trick. Collection is not a trick. Collection is a state of physical development that allows the horse to lower the 3 joints of the hind legs, lift up through its back, and carry the rider. But that takes some amount of time. So once again, and if we try to hold them in that frame, the problem is if we never release the frame, the horse's back will eventually drop. It will tire out, and then it will hollow, and then we see what we see so often with horses, that their backs are dropped, and now the people are fighting their way through. So what I hope to show you here over this next week is how we develop horses without all the fight, so to speak. Because they are developed correctly, they're able to do the things we ask them to do. Now, Amber's just going through her walk work here, and you see that he kind of pulls out a little bit once in a while. That's very normal for young horses. She's just beginning to take contact with him in the warm-up, so he kind of tests that a little bit. But, you can see that he gives right to that and doesn't make any big fuss. But we go through the walk work in the same way with every horse, only we would just come to a higher level. With this horse, as you can see, sometimes we'll do a lot of stretch work. We always do all the lateral work in the stretch before we then bring them up and begin to do it in a higher level frame, like in a working frame where we see this horse. Remember, working gaits mean the horse working over its back. So she's taking him through all these beginning exercises here. Now she's brought him up into the working walk, doing shoulder in. Remember that the gaits, the movements always come in the same order. Leg yield, shoulder in, haunches in, half pass. Though you won't see us do haunches in a great deal, I don't find it to be a very useful exercise. In fact, I find the half pass easier for horses to do than haunches in. And since most horses kind of go with their hips to the inside, the haunches in is not a greatly useful exercise. Haunches out is a more useful exercise where we bend the horse the opposite direction and put the hindquarters to the outside rather and the forehand to the inside and move into the direction of the bend. But once again, we can see here in this half pass how rhythmic all this is, and how quickly we can all go through this. It doesn't take a lot of time. Now you notice that this exercise session today is about 35 minutes long. That's about it. If it's taking you 2 hours to do your horse, there's something seriously wrong with what you're doing, unless you're conditioning for endurance training, which is a whole different issue. But with most horses, something like 30 to 45 minutes should be about right. We see so many horses today getting injected. And what I would say to you all, if your horses need joint injections, in most cases it's because you are overworking them and overworking them in the wrong way. Of course, if you don't have the horse over its back, and you try to do all these exercises, it's going to be very damaging to the leg. So once again, a definition to me of dressage, and I think how it was originally going all the way back to Xenophon the Greek, the idea was a more evolved, enlightened form of training where instead of forcing the horse to do things, he becomes a willing partner in the work because we develop him gymnastically. So we're never asking him to do things that he can't do. That being the biggest problem that I see in so many riders today is that they don't even recognize when their horse is getting tired. And being able to recognize these kind of things make a big difference in your training. We can't train to the same level every day. Know that. Just like if you're training to be a weightlifter, you don't lift the highest or the heaviest weights that you can lift every day. If you did, you burn out your muscles. So we work up. Just like if you're a runner, you don't run a marathon every day. You might run 5 miles a day, and then when you're ready to run the marathon, then you run the full marathon. But after I've done that once before, and everybody who does it, you can't walk for a few days afterwards. Well, that would be the same thing of a horse. So we don't want to do the most extreme things every day. But you can see with this one, he's doing a nice shoulder in here. He's beginning. You can see what we have to what we have to watch for a little bit. You can see how he's curled a little bit there. So as soon as he does that, we have to get the pole up or let him stretch back out is what we're doing here. So that's what we're always looking for. So as soon as you feel the horse curl over, and once again, this horse was very broken over in the neck. That is, he was over flexed at the third vertebrae in the neck. And like so many of them, when he would start to stretch down, you'd see him curl back because we had to unfurl and heal that break in his neck before we could any real connection is going to happen. So after 2 years, this horse is finally, all that's healed up. But in the meantime, we've developed him well over his back through the stretches, and now he's ready to come up and do more. But you'll notice how she did that walk work. She brought him into the working walk, and then she came back into the stretch again. As soon as he started to overbend a little bit, instead of trying to force him or make him more agitated by trying to add more leg and getting more excited. And once again, remember that excitement is not the same thing as impulsion. Real impulsion is an expression of the horse's level of fitness in relaxation, so to speak. Just like any other, like any human athlete. If a human athlete is stiff and tense, they're not going to perform very well. That's why we have so many sports psychologists today trying to help people understand these things. Well, the horse is the same way. If it's tense all the time, it's going to hurt itself because the muscles are being held tight. The blood can't flow through the muscles. Also why it's so important that we come back to the stretch often, because that's what allows the blood to flow back through the muscles and allows the horse to develop. So you see here now she's brought him back up a little bit. She's finding that correct position and going back to work on the half pass a little bit. Now I remember the first one he was a little resistive there, but she comes back here this time in this direction, and this is very nice. The rhythm is good. He's stepping well underneath the body. And that's what we're looking for. So we always go through that walk. Now he's starting a new exercise here, which is turning the haunches. So this is the first time he's tried that. So you can see how at the very end there, his inside hind leg, his left leg kind of stuck there for a minute. It was pretty good up to that point, but not too bad. So for his first attempt at that, that was really quite good. And notice that we never try to expect horses to be perfect at anything in a given day. We give them a chance to work on it and get better each day. Whereas if we just keep hammering and hammering at them about any particular exercise, they're going to get sick of it pretty soon and sick of you and start swishing their tails and grinding their teeth. So she's going to make a second attempt at that and see if we can improve it a little bit. Here, and he does. Nice rhythm here. Not bad, not bad, not bad, not bad. See how the left hind leg stuck a little bit? Once again, he started to go back. That's the danger of that. But then he walked on forward. So once again, while not perfect, that was only the second attempt he's ever made at the exercise. So that was pretty good. I'm happy with that. It shows improvement. So that's what we're trying to think about every day, is showing improvement rather than showing perfection. Perfection never gets there, and we're always seeking perfection, as any artist is doing, but it's something hard to achieve. So this is the third time. She's going to try it one more time, see if he does a little better here. Now notice we didn't beat him up. As I always say, don't beat, repeat. So when your horse doesn't do something, so this time I told her to let the circle be a little wider, and there, good, not bad. He got a little disorganized there in the very last steps there, but that was not bad. He started to keep the step rhythm, so we're going to reward him for that. Once again, for his first attempts at that, that was quite good. And once again, kind of 1, 2, 3, you're out kind of rule of mine is that, I'm never going to try something more than about 3 times. If it gets on beyond that, if I saw an improvement there, that's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for a little improvement every day in all things. And when we get that little bit of improvement, pretty soon we have a big improvement over time. Unfortunately, so many people are working against themselves and working against their horses when they try to ride so-called dressage. Because they just keep doing it over and over again, trying to perfect something on the spot or on a given day, and we never can do that without upsetting the horse. So get a little bit of improvement at a time. So you can see how we worked on that. We did 3 versions of the same thing, and then we came back and just let him walk and stretch back out again. Plenty for today, because I don't ever want the horse to think that any of these exercises, that he's going to start dreading them, so to speak, or anticipating them. So now she's brought him back into the working walk again. And she'll try the same thing from the other side. Once again, we always do everything on both sides, not necessarily the same amount of times. If he gets a good one the first time out here in this direction, I would stop at that. So once again, don't beat, repeat. Don't try to beat up your horses for misunderstanding or not being physically able to do what it is you're asking them to do. So once again, pretty good rhythm here in the half pass. Now notice how she's using that curb rein, that it stays soft and relaxed except for those few moments there. Now for that one was really pretty good. He crossed over a little bit that last step, but the rhythm stayed really nice. So I was very happy with that for his first attempt at that in that direction. And of course with all horses, everything is always a little easier in one direction than the other in the beginning. So that was really good. We're letting him come back to a stretch and no need to repeat that, as that one was better than the one in the other direction. So no need to repeat that at all. For his first attempt at that, that was quite good. So what do? We come back to the stretch again. Very nice, keeping it rhythmic and flowing. Your ride should flow like water, flowing forward all the time in rhythm. If you're constantly stopping a horse, now as you notice, I think with my workouts that, we rarely halt horses. Usually with beginning horses, we halt them only once at the end of the session. And then they really appreciate it. So we don't have any trouble with our horses trying to run through the reins, because by the time we halt them, they're ready to halt. Whereas if I do it 10 times over and over and over again, as I see so many people doing, then the horse is going to start resisting, and then you're going to have a lot of trouble in the halt. But we save that for the end, or maybe 1 or 2 times as the horse develops further in its level. So once again, all the way back down in the stretch. Now this is the first day of our week here. So today we're basically working on stretching the horse and adding a few new exercises like the turn on the haunches, which is the next thing we do after we teach half pass. Once again, remember the order of the exercises. And it's the same in all 3 gaits. It always starts with a leg yield. And remember, a leg yield, you have to be able to do a leg yield before you can actually even do a good circle. So the leg yield always comes first, then shoulder in, then haunches in or half pass. I personally tend to go right to the half pass because I think it's actually easier for the horse than the haunches in, which is kind of an awkward position, and horses tend to go kind of haunches in anyway, so it's not a very useful exercise. Like the turn on the forehand, it doesn't have a lot of value. It tends to put the horse on the forehand. Now the next exercise she's working on is going to be beginning to rein back. We've only done this once with horse before, but that was not bad. He begins to step. Now notice that she brought her upper body a little bit forward when she does that. That's the idea. Now ultimately the horse is going to just listen to the flow. In other words, you'll send the impulsion to the horse, and all you do is lighten your seat by bringing your upper body forward a little bit, and the horse will flow backwards once that energy flow is going through the body of the horse. So that was his first attempt at a rein back, and that was not too bad. Now it had to be a little coercive. She had to give him a little tap with the legs, but notice that the rein back came from her leg and not from her hand. She never pulled the horse backwards with her hands, which is the biggest mistake that I see most people doing, even very upper level horses. And remember, the rein back is not the same as a walk. The walk is a 4-beat gait. The rein back is a 2-beat gait. In order to be correct, the horse should go back like it trots, that is in diagonal pairs. That is the front hind leg with the inside, or the front hind leg with the outside foreleg, and vice versa. So back into this working walk again. And back into the rhythm, always establishing the rhythm again and the frame and the relaxation before we try any new thing. We never want to just, get after a horse and just keep doing it over and over and browbeat him until he hates the exercise. As William Steinkraus said, our great jumper rider, and also a great dressage rider, by the way, used to say, if you can't get a horse to like its job, it's never going to be very good. And that's very true, whether it's jumping or working in dressage on the flat or cross country or whatever the case may be. So she's going to try that rein back. She's done it once. We're going to do it one more time. Good. Now see, much less resistive that time. Stepping back in diagonal pairs, very nice. So that was excellent today. So then we're going to let him go forward and stretch back out again. So that was only his second rein back, and you see that was quite good. Now the reason in dressage that the rein back comes, very late, third level, I believe it is, by the time we're doing a rein back, because the horse must be well impulsed. That is, you must be able to feel the impulsion move through the body of the horse. That's how you get a correct rein back. So once again, when you watch test where the horse separates those diagonal pairs and goes back in a 4-beat walk, that tells you it's probably going back off of the hand, that is being pulled backwards, because that's what happens if you pull a horse backwards. It will not rein back correctly. It usually will rein back in a 4-beat. So that was a good workout there in the walk. We're very happy with that. Got 2 new exercises today, which were turn on the haunches, and we worked on the rein back. And he did both of those very, very nicely, so no need to complete them. The walk work was very nice. So now we're going to work warming him up in the trot now. Now notice we always start in the rising trot. A big thing for dressage riders to realize is that, yes, you are doing dressage if you're rising to the trot. We see so many people today who think that you're only doing dressage if you're sitting to the trot, or if you're in a dressage saddle, for instance. Nothing could be further from the truth, because we must warm the horse's back up before we sit on it. So as soon as we come into the trot work here, we're going to put him right into a stretch. Now this horse is only just now, once again, this is a very big horse. He's almost 18 hands. For him to even stretch on a 20-meter circle was almost impossible. Well, it's only just now, after 2 years of work, that we're beginning to actually work him in a dressage ring, and he can work in a dressage ring comfortably for his size and actually stretch on a 20-meter circle. We had to do it first on much bigger circles, 30-meter circles and 40-meter circles, because of the size of the horse. But this is very nice. He started out very nicely there. Good stretch. Same thing here. But if you go back and look at some of his earlier videos, you'll see how much deeper and rounder this horse is and how much slower he goes now. Now that he's over his back, he's covering more ground with fewer steps. So we come back and, of course, we stretch in both directions before we even think about bringing the horse up into any kind of frame. We're going to let him stretch down and warm up his back. And this is exactly what we would do on any given occasion, or if we were at a horse show, same thing. We warm up in exactly the same way. The big thing that I took home from working with Nuno Oliveira more than anything else was how systematically he worked his horses. He was the first time I saw somebody who really seemed to have a plan for what they were doing, rather than just sort of random riding, as I call it, So getting that sense of having a real purpose to what you're doing and a system by which you understand. And once you understand that, it takes the guesswork out of it. And once you understand, there's no point in trying to do a half pass if you can't do a leg yield. So once again, nice working trot here, stepping well into the tracks of his front feet. Very nice rhythm, not breaking his back. So now she can begin to sit to the trot. And he already begins to come up. Now today we're not going to ask this horse for collection. Today is the first day of his week, so we're only going to ask for working gaits, which he does quite nicely. Now remember, when horses can collect, they will. It isn't difficult for them after they have gone through the change that has to happen in the correct development of the horse's back in order to let that happen. That is, the withers pulling up through the shoulders. Now today we're going to work him a little bit on canter. He's been a very difficult horse in the canter. We've hardly cantered him at all, really, in the last 2 years because his canter was so huge. He's just now beginning to be able to sit down a little bit in the canter and keep himself over his back without running. He'd learned to bolt a bit in the canter, and that was a bit of his problem. And you can see how even there she just broke the stride a little bit, but she comes right back to it, just gives him a little tap with her whip and puts him back in. Once again, we're only just beginning to ride this horse in the dressage ring, in the canter. He's only just now beginning to be able to do a 20-meter circle in the canter, once again, because he's so huge. But that was very good. Starting off, you can see he's beginning to have a nice, steady rhythm in the canter and how uphill it's starting to be. So the exercises come in the same order. As soon as we can get the horse over its back a little bit and stretched in the canter, and then we're going to come back. Now it's going to start with the leg yield, the same series of exercises that we did in the trot and the walk. Now on this particular day, we didn't do a lot of trot work because I wanted to work on his canter. So all we did was warm him up in the trot, and then we came back to the canter work. Started the canter work before he's too tired. If I'd done all the trot work first and then come to the canter, which I've tried many times before, he's just too tired to do it. He's a big horse that expends a lot of energy. It's like a big person. And then we go to the shoulder in. Very nicely done. How nicely and steady. He was a horse that, and you see these beginning transitions upwards, he had learned to throw his head in the canter. And every time you tried to throw him to canter him, he would just throw his head straight in the air and kind of bolt out from underneath you. So we had to go back and really be sure that he was well in the bridle before we did anything else. But now you can see that trot's a little more active. So after that canter, we come back and we're going to give him another stretch. That was very good. For him, once again, this is one of the first days that he's actually been able to canter a 20-meter circle and stay balanced. So that beginning part was very good. We come back and give him another stretch. So once again, what we're going to see over this period of many works on the same horse, a week or two of daily workouts, we'll see how we change up what we do every day so that we don't do everything the same way every day. We do the exercises in the same order, of course, as I've spoken before, but for instance, we're not doing so much trot work today because we want to work on the canter. And I know from experience with this horse, if we do too much trot work, he's too tired, he can't hold the canter together. So we just did enough trot work to get him balanced and supple up to his back. But look how even now, how much more suspension his gaits are developing. Still has a little hard time getting through those corners. But he's nicely settled over his back right here. She pushes him ahead of her just a little bit more, and that's really quite nice there. You can see how he already comes up a little bit there. So remember that real collection, the horse elevates its entire forehand, not just snaps its legs up higher. Good steady rhythm here and straight. Now you notice that she has a double bridle on. We're just beginning to school him in this because of our because we are schooling the canter. We switch back and forth. We don't always school him in the double bridle, but because he was so difficult in the canter, that is, he had learned to bolt, we're having the double bridle there just in case we need it. Now he's gotten pretty much over that, and this is looking quite nice. And that for him was a good upwards transition. He didn't just throw his head. He lifted a little bit, but not bad. But the canter is nice and uphill here, as we want it to be. And she's going to go right to the leg yield just like we did in the other direction. So once again, whatever we do in one direction, we do in the other direction. Good balanced canter. And once again, if your horse feels out of balance in the canter, don't canter more. Go back and do more trot work. Cantering a horse that's out of balance will only end up with a sore back and much too much aerobic fitness, so to speak, especially if you're working with hot-blooded horses. The more you canter them, the fitter they get, and pretty soon it takes a long time to work them. So something that we always have to manage is the horse's level of fitness. You know, the slower, duller kind of horses, we have to always work to get them fitter. And with the horses that have a more thoroughbred nature, and that was a beautiful downwards transition she just did. Notice she was able to step right into that working trot without any change in the rhythm or head position. So that was really good. Excellent downwards transition. Which, once again, we're just beginning to do transitions with this horse. After 2 years of developing him, now we're beginning to do transitions between the gaits. Up to now, we've mostly just been doing transitions within the gait, that is, lengthening the stride a little bit or not, as the case may be, and never skipping gears, so to speak, skipping from the walk up to the canter, which we're going to start doing with this horse very soon here. And once again, she comes back and does a really nice lengthening stride rising. Look how nicely he swings through. Not the biggest thing he can get. We're not always looking for the biggest thing. We're looking for consistency and rhythm. So I remember Klimke talking about in a clinic one time how, you know, a horse only had so many of those big extensions in him, so don't waste them. You know, we only do those extreme things every now and then, so to speak. If we do extreme things every day, that is, once again, the highest level the horse can perform, pretty soon it's going to get burnt out. So after that good canter, which I really liked, and he did a beautiful lengthening of stride there, where he really swung through really nicely, and we're going to come back and once again give him a stretch. Let the blood flow back through the body. And of course, let the exercise session itself flow forward. And she comes back to the sitting trot here. Now notice he got a little above the bridle there, but she didn't just pull him down. She took her time doing it. Now that was a much better corner than we saw the last time. And now she's going to ask for a little bigger trot, and this time lengthening this trot sitting. And how nicely that is. He comes right through and right over his back. That's exactly what we want to see happen. There was no change in the rhythm. Once again, if your horse changes the rhythm when you try to do a lengthening, he's probably just running, so to speak, and he's not over his back. So while in the beginning, sometimes that's all we can do is just go a little faster and then shorten them again. But that's not what we want to do ultimately. But that was a really good extension on that last trot. Now she's going to work the canter this way. And notice he lifts his head up. She doesn't fight him too much about that because you could see he was trying to elevate his his entire forehand. So we're not going to worry about whether he stays perfectly on the bit for these transitions at this level yet. They will do all by themselves here before long. So once again, a good uphill canter. And once again, he's able to hold the rhythm on a 20-meter circle, which for him is a great deal. Nicely balanced as he goes forward, staying uphill. Now she's going to try a 15-meter circle, which he does very nicely. No loss of rhythm there. And that's the first time we've actually ever done a 15-meter circle on him. So once again, to realize, folks, when people say, oh, it's going to take 2 years to develop my horse, the beauty is once you take that 2 years to develop them correctly, then everything becomes easier and the horse becomes a willing participant in all this work. Once again, another beautiful lengthening stride there coming across the diagonal. See how he reaches, the rhythm doesn't change, he just lengthens the stride. And a beautiful downwards transition there. Notice she just listened to her seat as soon as she stretched up. Came right back into a nice walk. So now we're beginning to start these exercises from the walk. And actually for him, that was really quite good. He's only done transitions from the walk to canter one other time before. So that was quite good. He did have to lift his head up. Now you can see there he lost a little bit. She just half halted maybe a little bit too much there. Got more than she wanted. So she's just come back. She's not going to beat the horse up. She's just going to come back and start again, just like that. So for him at this level, that was really very good. He sat down a little bit and lifted himself up, came right into the canter transition. So good enough for today. Remember those famous words by Capitaine Boudon, ask for a lot, be satisfied with a little, and reward often. Probably the most important quote you'll ever remember about the training of horses, the one that Nuno used to talk about quite often. So we ask for a lot and be satisfied with a little and reward. So once again, that was a good 15-meter circle that time. Pretty good downwards transition there. It didn't lock up on her. And she comes back and once again does a really nice lengthening of the stride sitting there. Once again, he stretches and the leg. Now notice how in those lengthenings, the back leg comes through exactly on the front leg. Spend a lot of time watching so-called upper-level horses and watch many of their back ends, and you'll see that there's a lag time between the front and the back legs. Now, when you see that, that tells you that the horse is not through. It's not working over its back. It's just flipping its front legs out. It's not in real collection, so to speak. In real collection, the horse lowers behind, but it still brings the hind leg through to the same degree as the front leg. That's what damages so many horses. Now, once again, this horse has been in training for 2 years. He's never had an unsound step. He's not injected anywhere, as are none of our horses. So again, if you're spending more time with veterinarians than you're spending with your horse riding, there's something seriously wrong with what you're doing, and you need to take a look at that. All these new things that we have that veterinarians have learned to charge a lot of money for, that people are spending their fortunes on, trying to keep horses sound because they're riding them badly. If only you realize if you ride this way, you won't have to spend so much time. You'll get much more quality time with your horses. A good shoulder in. Now notice we moved to the shoulder in there. You'll have much more quality time with your horses. And a good balanced canter here for him again. And once again, a nice downwards transition. He steps through. He doesn't just freeze his back in that downwards transition. Exactly what we want to have happen. And once again, remember, we've only just in the last month or so begun to do this kind of work with him, because he is strong enough to do it and established enough in the aids. Now notice this horse is never swishing his tail. There's hardly a sign of resistance at all, because we're asking him only to do things that he's capable of doing. Another really nice lengthening of stride here. Look how he lifts up and we get more thrust that time. Now that time there was more thrust in that, so that was really good, developing beautifully. So that was probably the best one I've seen out of this horse in the sitting trot. So we're going to come back and right away stretch him again, reward him instead of doing it over and over again. So again, the biggest mistake you can do is to keep doing an exercise over and over again. All that ever happens when you go beyond about the third try on anything, it usually just gets worse if you actually know what you're looking at. Now, many trainers will have people do things over and over again until the horse is short and hollow and then tell them that it's right. And that's why we have so much misunderstanding about what dressage is today, because unfortunately too many unqualified people are trying to teach it. It takes years to develop these kinds of skills. years under instruction. Klaus Bachenhall's book talked about how, a student interested in dressage really should be under instruction every day for 5 years to begin to just even develop a seat. But unfortunately, dressage has turned into the thing that all the people that, are afraid to do anything else on the back of a horse want to do because, they think it's all very fancy and it makes them look good, whatever their reasons are. But once again, they don't realize if you ride like that, you're really never going to get up into the upper levels in the correct way. You're going to keep faltering, getting them up there, and your horses are going to fall apart and break down, and you'll constantly be buying horses. So a horse should last for at least 20 years. It shouldn't just last for 2 years of showing and then the horse is shot for life. Once again, as I said many times, if you're having to inject your horses in most cases, not every case, maybe some 20-year-old or 22-5-year-old might need some injections a little bit, but in my experience, they don't. If you don't overwork them, I've never seen a horse yet that actually needed to be injected. Once again, a very good canter, and here she's going to lengthen the canter. Now notice how he comes through, just like in the lengthening of the stride. In the trot, he brought his hind legs through and lifted up. That's what we want to see happen. And notice that none of these canters have we done for very long. Short periods like that, then we come back to the trot. You don't want to just keep going and going and going. And once again, back to a good working trot again. Now remember, the definition of the working trot is the horse is clearly working over its back, but on this day we're not asking him for any collection. We're not asking him to lower behind yet. We're just asking for good balanced working gaits. Really nice there on this diagonal, staying in the working trot. You can see how much flexion. Go back and look at some of the earlier videos of this horse, and you'll see how much less flexion he has, how much less thrust. Thrust is the degree to which the horse pushes off the ground, like a rocket taking off. That can only happen if the horse lowers behind and is engaged through its back. Very nice and straight there. Fortunately, the ring is getting a little dry by this point today. Beautiful transition back to walk. And again, a good upwards transition from the walk. Not bad at all. He lifted his head just a little bit. But once again, we will not discipline him for that. In time, that will just go away. As I said, a few months ago, when you cantered him, he would just throw his head straight up in the air and bolt with you. So this is a big improvement without upsetting him. We never want to kill the horse's enjoyment of the work. If you do that, I guarantee your work will never be as enjoyable. And you take a good chance of damaging yourself and the horse in the process. Now you can see that he fell out of the canter there for a minute. She just puts him right back in it. Once again, he's starting to get a little tired now. So you can see how he's starting to wane just a little bit. And this is only 35 minutes of work. Once again, that's about what it should take to work a horse, not an hour and a half. I find about 45 minutes is about the right, is usually where my workouts end up, unless I'm have a particular problem horse that I have to keep in the ring for a while. Remember, the cardinal rule is you never want to let a nervous horse leave the ring. So that's the only time you'll see me stay in the ring for a long time with the horses. A horse that's nervous is going to stay in there, even if it's just in a walk, until it totally relaxes. So the horse is going to come back. Now she's going to work the stretch a little bit. So after doing all that canter work, now we're going to stretch him a little bit in the canter like that. And you see how he brings the neck out. Yet he still keeps the forehand quite elevated, even in the stretch in the canter. Now that's what we're looking for. So that's really good. Now, if we tried this with this horse 6 months ago, he would have just taken off with you and bolted. But now he's quite accustomed to the work, happy in his work, and so he's not running away from anything. So that was a really good stretch for him. First time in the canter, and she's back to this trot sitting. Look how beautifully he comes back and right back into the frame. And notice there's no break in the horse's neck, how correctly he's flexed at the pole and not in the neck. So again, when you see these horses that their necks seem to go up and then they flatten out the top, that's a horse that's been broken or overflexed in the tendons that hold the third and fourth vertebrae together, usually the third and fourth, in the neck. Once that happens, it's like having a short circuit in your wiring. So now we're going to do our final halt, just coming down the center line and halting. And you can see how difficult. A half 10-meter circle for this horse is pretty hard, so we let him overshoot that just a little bit. And we'll get closer to that as he develops more collection. But it's again, if the exercise has no rhythm, it's really not any good. So he kind of sprawled out in that just a little bit. So we're going to let him stretch here. And what happened there is Amber just asked a little too soon. So we're going to ask for that halt. In other words, she asked too much with her back and kind of stopped him from moving. That's why he sprawled out behind. So we're going to do that one more time for her benefit more than the horse's in this particular case. And we'll try and smooth that out just a little bit here. So I hope you've enjoyed this. This is going to be a series. We're going to do probably about 10 full-length sessions in a row, so you can see how we develop horses over time. And how nicely he came down the center line that time, better on the center line. Oh, and how nicely he stepped into the halt that time. That's what we're looking for. This is Will Faber from Art to Ride with my associate trainer Amber and her horse Legolas.